We're going to go ahead and get started this morning. We appreciate you coming and sharing with us in this hour. And we're going to try to give you some information on the state accountability system. If you're interested in tweeting about this, here's our hashtag, CISD discussion. So if you're interested in doing that, please feel free to do that. Hope you get some great information. If you'll hold your questions to the end, we will pass the mic around so you can ask the questions on the mic so we can pick that up, because we are taping for those folks who can't get off to come to this meeting, and so we'll be able to put that on our website. So anyway, the system of education and the system of accountability that we have now is called STAR, our program of accountability, and it's gone through all kinds of iterations. Back when I started teaching, which was way long ago, we had the TABS test. Then it went to the TOS test, then it's actually TEAMS, then TOS, then TAX, and now here we are at STAR. And each iteration of the test, we've gotten more high stress, more high stakes, more time taken testing and practicing for testing. And this is the worst of all, in my opinion. With the number of tests have increased, the number of days testing have increased, and we are involved on several different levels as a school district in opposing the system as it now stands. In fact, we started here what they're calling the Texas Revolution against high-stakes testing. That's a national thing now with, right now, 870 school districts in the state of Texas, out of the 1,000 that are in the state, have signed a resolution opposing the high-stakes testing that we have. And we really think if you pick up any paper or any news article that talks about the Capitol, what's going on down there, they're talking about scaling back this program that we currently have. In terms of numbers of tests, and I don't know where that's going to end up, but I think what we started here with the grassroots movement against high-stakes tests and everything focused on the test has been really, really well received, and I think we will make some progress in that. I'll tell you a little bit more about the High Performance School Consortium that we've been talking about in Coppell, about a new accountability system at the end. But right now I'd like to bring up Dr. Karen Vance, who is our Director of Accounting of Testing and Accountability, and I'll let her walk you through the new STAR program and all the ins and outs of what that's going to mean to our kids.
Thank you, Dr. Turner.
Oh, you've got that.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today for the discussion and to hear a little bit about state testing and the accountability system. We want to, we titled this State Testing, the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and there are good parts to it, there are some bad parts to it, and there are certainly some very ugly parts to it. We're going to present you with what's available out there in terms of the state testing program, and then you decide what you think is the good, the bad, and the ugly. Right now, we're under a state testing program called STAR, and all of y'all here, I'm sure, have heard about the STAR assessments that began last year in spring of 2012. STAR assessments assess students in mathematics in grades 3 through 8, also in reading in grades 3 through 8. Our students in 4th and 7th grade participate in a writing test in addition to the reading and the math tests. Our 5th and 8th grade students participate in a science test in addition to the reading and the math test. And then our 8th grade students take 4 tests. They take a reading, a math, a science, and a social studies test. And then in high school, we have 15 EndofCourse exams that our high school students will be required to take as part of a graduation program. So I want you to think about the number of tests that a student would be exposed to in their academic career and the number of subjects in which the current state assessment system currently addresses. These are the EndofCourse exams. We mentioned 15 EndofCourse exams. So these are the 15 exams. Our students participate in reading and writing in English 1, 2, and 3. You'll see the 3 math tests, the 3 science tests, and the 3 social studies tests that our students are expected to participate and to do well in order to graduate. This is our current system. I want to take you back a few years to when the state assessment was first developed back in 1980, when we first began administering state assessments. And I want you to take a look at the grades in which they were assessed. Grades 3, 5, and 9. We've come a little ways since then. So we have an accountability system and a state testing system that started with testing students in elementary, middle, and high school at very specific times. Something different from TABS versus right now. When TABS was first rolled out, if you will, for the state of Texas, there wasn't a graduation requirement tied to state testing. The assumption was the students completed the coursework, they went through the rigorous coursework, and they can earn a diploma. That changed over the years as every 5 or 6 years here we have a new or every about 10 years we have a new accountability system based on the state assessment. So you can see over the years the system has morphed from a system that did system checks, if you will, periodically, to an assessment system that addresses students at all grade levels 3 through high school. I want to talk to you a little bit about STAR, coming back forward to today, to 2013. I want to talk to you a little bit about STAR that was administered last year. Some of you, if you're parents and you had students in grades 3 through 8, you may be wondering, how did my student do last year? I haven't heard. With TAKS, we always heard at the end of the year, by the end of the year, how our students performed. We're rolling out a new assessment system, or the state rolled out a new assessment system, and unfortunately, we will not have the individual student reports until late January. They're starting to roll them out for us just now based on tests that were taken last April. So if we think about the timeliness of the results, this year we administered STAR, we took quite a few instructional days last year, and I understand it's a process, and we understand there's a process that goes into standard setting, but unfortunately what has happened is taken so long that the data that we're going to get back at the end of this month really isn't that informative in terms of making instructional decisions for students, because we're talking about an assessment that was done almost a year ago. And if you have parents, as you've seen your kids grow over the past year, both physically and academically, they're at a different place right now than they were last year. So they are providing us with the reports, just not as timely as what have been helpful as educators and as parents. Another issue that arises with state tests is that because of state mandates, we're only allowed to see the test every 3 years. So we make promotion decisions for students, we make graduation decisions for students based on an assessment that we never see, either as educators or as parents. So state law requires every 3 years for the state to release the test. So we have students for 2012 who we have a score on, but we don't know exactly what they were measured on in terms of what does that test look like. And sometimes that's a misconception, because the thinking is that, well, we gave the test, didn't we? Teachers gave the test. Teachers were present when kids were taking the test. But teachers aren't actually allowed to look at the test when they're given the test. In fact, if they do, it's a violation of education code. So our teachers are not allowed to look at the test except for under certain circumstances. So we don't know really what our students know and are able to do based on tests, because they're only released every 3 years, even though it's a high-stakes testing system for promotion and graduation. So thinking about end of course, let's take it for our kids in high school and some of our kids in middle school. Let's think about end of course exams. So who has to take an end of course exam? According to state law, any student who's enrolled in grades 5 through 10 and is taking a high school course, we have some middle school students taking high school courses, such as Algebra 1, quite a few middle school students taking those courses, in fact. They're required to take the end of course test. This year's 10th graders were last year's cohort who first came through as part of end of course as a graduation requirement. Now that they're 10th graders, they're required to participate as well. Something we want to make sure that the public is clearly aware of is that some of our students take correspondence courses for credit, and they receive course credit. These students still have to take the end of course exam to meet their graduation requirement. Some of our students take dual credit courses where they are receiving college credit for a course that they take when they're in high school. These students have to take the test and meet a certain performance standard in order to graduate. Students who are in AP and IB, Coppell has a strong AP and IB program. So we have quite a few students who are participating in AP exams at the end of the year and IP exams. Students may score high enough on these exams to be awarded college credit by the college that they attend. they still have to take the EndofCourse exam in order to graduate. So we have a lot of double testing that will happen for our students. Not only does that affect students in terms of their graduation, it affects students in terms of the number of instructional days that are lost to testing. So you have students who are in a ninth grade human geography class. They'll take the AP exam as well as the World Geography exam in May. So a lot of instructional time is spent on testing. On end-of-course exam, students have to meet a certain score in order for their end-of-course exam performance to go into their cumulative score in order to graduate. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But there's a minimum score that goes into graduation requirements. There's a satisfactory level that goes into play in graduation requirements. We'll talk a little bit about what that looks like. For each area, for each content area, such as math, where a student has to take algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, on those 3 assessments, they have to achieve a cumulative score in order to graduate. But it gets more complicated than that. Not only do they have to achieve a certain cumulative score, they have to achieve a minimum score on each one of those assessments. So we're talking about math, a cumulative score in math, a cumulative score in science, a cumulative score in social studies, and a cumulative score in language arts. And keep in mind, language arts is actually 6 assessments for English 1, 2, and 3. So we're talking about a very complicated testing system for our students to graduate. We've gone through activities with our counselors, with simulations for students so that they can better guide students and educate parents and students on the process. But the idea is that it's a very complicated system that worries us quite a bit. So we talked about the minimum passing standard. If a student scores a minimum on all 3 tests, let's say algebra, geometry, and algebra 2, they may achieve the minimum score on all 3 tests. That's not enough for a student to graduate, because what happens is the sum of the minimum score is not going to reach the cumulative score a child needs, which is somewhat misleading, because a child thinks, great, I got the minimum score. That's great. And then we have to tell the child, well, that's not good enough, because the state says that you need to get a cumulative score, and if you continue with minimum scores over all your tests, you're not going to be able to graduate. That's a tough conversation to have for a child. So the child has to decide, am I going to retake this test or not? Because there is the option for retakes. Are we going to retake 15 tests? Are we going to retake, or are we going to be okay with the tests that we have? That's a huge decision for parents. It's a huge decision for students. And it's a decision that students and parents have to make as a team to determine, what do I need to graduate? So back to our example here. Let's say we've got 3 science assessments, and the minimum score for the science assessment is 900. That's not it, but it just makes it easy because it's nice and round. So we've got, let's say the minimum score is 900. If a child gets 900 on each of the 3 assessments, they're not going to hit the cumulative score of 3,000. So again, what test are we going to take? We've got a 9th grader who's 14 years old. What test are you going to retake? It's a difficult decision, because you know what happens is when he's a sophomore, how many more tests does he have to take? He's got 5 more tests to take for his sophomore level classes. So we're thinking about sophomore level tests, those 5 sophomore level tests, and then we're thinking if we need to retake any of our freshman level tests. And then by the time they're a junior, they're going to take 5 more tests, and they have 10 tests behind them. Which of these 10 tests might I need to retake for a buffer? So think about how complicated that is for our students. And this is a system that's in legislation. Not only do the tests determine whether or not a student graduates, the tests also dictate what graduation plan a child is going to graduate on. Depending upon how well the student performs, he or she may not be able to graduate on the Distinguished Achievement Program, even though the child has met every other criteria for the DAP. The child may be denied a DAP program award, a DAP award, if you will, because of EOC performance on one test. Now I want to emphasize that one test. That's one test on one day in the child's life. One test, one day in the child's life. Huge impact for kids. Those of you who are parents, you know, from day to day, our kids, some days they're on, some days they're not on so much. Things happen. Some days they're feeling well, some days they're not feeling well. One day will determine the graduation plan. So some of the concerns. One, the tests are primarily multiple choice. Now the writing tests certainly have some open-ended where they write compositions and short answers. Primarily multiple choice tests are determining our students' graduation plans, and for some students whether or not they graduate at all. Numerous testing days. Our high schools, when the EndofCourse exams are completely rolled out by the end of next year, 45 instructional days will be devoted to testing. 45 instructional days will be devoted to testing at our high schools. Now, not all students will test on all 45 days. We'll have some students who are retesting, who are choosing to retest. They may want to increase their score. They may not have to, they don't have to take both an English 1, English 2, and an English 3 test. Some kids might, but 45 instructional days. So for each individual student, it's not a huge impact, unless you think about there's got to be somebody who has to administer that test. And it may be that student's classroom teacher who is pulled out from instruction to administer the test to students. So it will impact every student on the campuses because somebody has to be pulled from the classroom to administer the tests on these 45 days that we have to be available to administer tests. Redundant testing, we talked about the credit by exam, the AP, the IB. We are testing our kids on multiple days for the same course. We talked about a one-day snapshot of student achievement. Untimely results, when do they come back? For some of our end-of-course tests, they may not come back until after instruction is completed at the end of the year. And we know last year's results, we still don't have them in the hands of teachers and parents. It's a one-size-fits-all test. What works for Johnny may not work for Jane when we're talking about multiple choice tests, but Johnny and Jane are held to the same criteria. So it's not tailored for students and students' needs. We know it's complicated and convoluted. Not only is the state assessment system complicated and convoluted, but the state accountability system has become very complicated and convoluted as well. And the reason why it's become so convoluted is because we're trying to fix or we're trying to right a wrong. We're trying to hold campuses and districts accountable for a one-day testing, which may not be the best way to test our students, nor is it the best way to identify whether or not we're an effective program, campus, district. Certainly districts and campuses need to be accountable. There's no question about that. We need to be accountable. We receive state funds. We work with your children. We need to be accountable. But is this the best way to measure a campus or a district success? Is this the best way to measure educational success? There are some resources on TEA's website. We certainly want to encourage parents and educators to go to TEA's website and learn more about the assessment system, because this is just a brief overview. And we also have some information on Copel ISD's website.
Thank you, Dr. Vance. So Dr. Vance posed the question, is this the best way for accountability? Is this the best way to show really what our learners and our educators are doing in our district? Our district officials have always been frustrated over the fact that the state measures are limiting our ability to make decisions what are best for our learners. So district officials and some different consortiums have formed in order to help bring the words to the legislators that this is not what we want to be measured by. There are ways that we want to really show our growth, and we feel like we have better ways to do that. We also know that as we continue into the 21st century education, we've got to continue to look at our learning standards and making sure that we have the depth of the learning standards. You know, the state gives us a lot of breadth to their wide standards, and we talked a little bit about that at the last discussion. We're looking at more depth to what our learners are supposed to have knowledge of, and make sure that that's connected globally. We also want to make sure that the assessments are authentic. Are they really measuring what we want them to measure? And is it providing the information to the local community? Is it really providing the information you need to? We want to look at that. So, your next one.
So what does this really mean for you, and what are we proposing might be an alternative to an accountability system that is based upon one test on one given day for any one of our learners? And Dr. Vance asked and made that point very clear that we believe that our learners have much more depth to what they're learning and what we should be held accountable for than just what that test that they're taking on that one given day. As we've said over and over again, we believe in accountability, but we believe in accountability and want to be held accountable for the right things and to the right stakeholders and for the right reasons. So what does this mean? One of the things that we would like to begin to explore, and where you are going to be a valuable partner, we cannot take this journey without you and your input and your guidance in this process, is what would a community-based accountability system look like? What does that mean? We say we value local control. After all, it is your learners who are walking into our building every day. So what are those things that you believe we should be held accountable for as a school district? When you look at your learner every day, how do you want information reported to you? And what information do you want reported to you that helps you understand how your learner is growing, that helps you understand what their strengths are, that helps you understand their weaknesses, that helps you understand what is the school district doing to minimize those weaknesses and bridge those gaps? Those are the things that parents want to know, and we want some of that detail from you. We believe that you need multiple measures. That again, just seeing a student's test score, as we know, any given day can provide different circumstances, that's not enough rich information to help us understand who your learner is and what they need from us in terms of support and in terms of growth. Multiple measures. As we're beginning to seek input from parents, it might look like, what does it mean to have future-ready students? What does it mean to have learners that are college and career ready? Might the SAT and those kinds of assessments be an additional way to help us report to you on how your learners are progressing? ACT is developing measurements that begin as early as elementary school, so that we can really be guaranteeing to you that we're doing what we need to prepare them to walk across that stage and be future ready, beginning at elementary. Portfolios. We might begin to figure out how can we put together a portfolio of work, a portfolio of data that will help you understand your whole child and what their performance is like across a year, not just on that given day. We believe that regardless of where your learner enters on the first day of school, we should be held accountable for at least that year's worth of growth. And so how do we report that to you? Regardless of whether your learner is struggling, whether your learner is on an accelerated pathway, you want to ensure that we've helped your learner grow in that year. So how can we report that kind of growth to you, and what format do you want that to be reported to you so it makes sense, so it's something you can understand and you can have conversations with your classroom educators and your principals as well as with your own children? The other thing that is important to us and valuable is, what are the skill sets that you know your children need in order to be successful above and beyond just their school experience? We all know in our daily experiences that the content and the skill sets that we learned in school were instrumental in our current success, But our kids are living in a more complex, more globalized economy. And so there are additional skill sets that they need. From a community, we want to know, what are those skill sets that you believe should be in place and that you want to be reported to you, so that when your learner does graduate, whether it's from New Tech or from Coppell High School, you can be ensured they have a grasp of those skill sets to help them be successful. Is it collaboration? Is it written and oral communication? What are those things that you value so much that you say to the district, we want you to be held accountable to ensuring that my learner has these skill sets?
We are one of the districts that were selected for the High Performing Schools Consortium that Dr. Turner is going to talk to you about in just a little bit. Some of the recommendations for that High Performance Schools Consortium is that we do back out of the amount of testing that we have, but that we put in place something that is more appropriate with the community. Whether we actually get to go that route or not, we still want to have input from our community and start going this direction. We may still be held accountable exactly as Dr. Vance shared with our STAR and EOC requirements, or we might get to lessen some of those requirements. We will know that in maybe a year. So in the meantime, we're going to continue to forge forward. So what we need, how are we going to be able to implement and make some of this work, is we're going to need input from our community. We're going to select or get our information from our community in several different ways. We're going to put together a survey. It's actually in the works right now, and that we're going to send it out to everyone so that there is some survey input. That's one way to get some information from all of our stakeholders. We are also going to survey our learners, and so we're getting all voices. We have Parent University, which is a group of parents that are working with the district in getting some information and then also being able to get out the information that we need. So they'll be able to help us with gathering our information, but sharing the word as well. We're going to have community forums. We'll also have virtual forums, so there'll be different platforms that information will be shared and gathered. We will continue to work with our staff so that if teachers are approached or principals, then they will be able to answer or direct in any way, provide the information of the direction we're going. Based on all that information and the data sets that Ms. Brandon was talking about, we'll take that information to start creating some things. We'll take that, what is the output we want? What do our graduates need to have? What are the skills and the profile they need to have in order to leave and be successful beyond Coppell? So we'll develop our graduate profile from all that information. And we'll also start putting together, what does a community-based system look like, accountability system look like for Coppell? What does our community want? What is going to be the best information for you to know where the learners are, where they're growing? And that will take a lot of educator and community training, and something that will be ongoing, not just this year, but it will be ongoing as we continue to grow and develop together.
So, what can you do? First of all, you took the first step and you are here today. And for those of you who are repeat customers and attend the discussion offer, we thank you. Because the most important thing that you all can do as invested stakeholders in this thing that we call school every day is to be present and to have your voice heard. As Dr. Dennison mentioned, we are in the midst of designing a parent survey to begin to understand what are those accountability measures that you would like to see put in place. That survey will be emailed to you, and if you will please make sure that you sign in and that we capture your email address, that would be great. But that survey will be available in multiple different formats and will be distributed in multiple different ways. The other thing that we really ask you to do is to engage your neighbors. We know that everyone's schedule is busy and everyone is overscheduled and there's not enough minutes and not enough hours in the day. And some of the parents that I talk to, who I know are wonderful parents who care deeply about the school system, they are not aware that some of this is going on. They're not aware of the complexity of the testing system. They're not aware of what truly our accountability and what that one word or now what our number grade might be, and that maybe there might be an alternative. So please begin to have these conversations with your parents, with your neighbors, with your, when you go to church on Sunday. Have them watch. This is going to be recorded and on the website. Encourage them to attend meetings. Encourage them to fill out the survey. We want whatever we develop as this alternative accountability system, we want it to be representative of our entire community. And its strength and its value is going to come by ensuring that we do have a representation across all of our school district. We want to engage our business partners. Again, they are a part of what makes our district work so well, and they have an invested interest in the strength of our district. So please encourage them to be a part of this process as well. And as Dr. Dennison said, this is our first introduction. We will be coming to you with additional information, with more in-depth information. Dr. Turner is in the infancy of beginning to design what would community forums look like, so we can really have some in-depth conversations with people around a table to design these particular measures that we're talking about. But we wanted to begin to introduce this so we can start getting some buzz and some excitement to hopefully widen the number of people that are involved in the conversation. And with that, we're going to turn it over to Dr. Turner.
Thank you. I think it's important to understand that what we're attempting to do is move from a very traditional educational system where you have the system that we all came through, where the teacher stands in front of the room and talks to kids, tells them what they know, and the kids memorize all that and then report it back on tests like these, into a system that kids are engaged in that content and are allowed to soar in terms of their involvement with the content and learn it at a much deeper level. So we're in the transition, trying to respond to the needs of society about kids, because the past was about ranking and sorting kids. The top 10% went off to college, a bunch of other ones went out into the workforce, a bunch of them, 30% of them or 40 didn't even make it through high school. That was the old system. We're really, if you walk through the high school and see we're running the same basic system all over the United States, and we're not preparing kids, even as good as we do it here in Coppell, we're still not preparing kids for the future that they're going to inherit. And so we realize that, and we're trying to respond to that, and we're trying to help our great teachers move from telling kids what they know to designing lessons that engage the kids and excite them about the content and let them get involved at a much deeper level. And those kids, if we'll just get out of their way, will go much further in their learning than we could ever push them. And so that's our plan. That's what we're trying to do. And what we're saying to you is this accountability system gets worse and worse and takes more time and more time every time they roll one out. And it's pushing us away and actually blocking us from being able to make the changes that we need to make to really engage and inform our kids. When everything is about the test and it's so high stakes, then our teachers become locked in to, wait a minute, all that design is wonderful and I would love to let those kids get involved at that level, but what if they don't pass the test? So I've got to go back to giving worksheets, to telling everybody what I know, and it just keeps us from being able to make progress. I'm really excited about the things going on in our school district. We have teachers that are working very hard to change their skills and to design those creative lessons, but it's a slow process because they are fearful, and we do a great job of disaggregating data. With the computers and the programs that we have, we can tell you, we can go back for 5 years, we can tell you which teacher on which campus, at which grade level, in which classroom, those 2 kids that sat in the back happened to be in a certain student population that didn't score high enough. So the whole system, the campus and the district, was rated less than the community expectation. Think about the pressure that puts on a teacher. So it becomes, oh my gosh, I have to make sure I say all of this curriculum. I have to make sure that I say everything so that they can hear it from me and then regurgitate it on this test so that we can get the score that we need. When the system is like that, then it pushes out all of the creativity, the innovation, the collaboration, all of that out of the classroom, and everything becomes about that test. And so that's what we're saying is we've got to have a new system. These conversations have been ongoing for 4 or 5 years. We finally, in the 2011 legislative session, we had a bill that we wrote, Senate Bill 1557. What Senate Bill 1557 did was set up a pilot program of school districts to get out of this system that you heard Dr. Vance present, to be able to work with the community to establish a system that was reasonable, more information for parents in every subject for all their children, how they were doing, but less testing that would be reported out to the state in an accountability format. And what we said in that bill was, if you will allow us to do that, then we can, as a group, outperform the state of Texas, all the children in the state of Texas that are in this rat race of trying to get this testing system done. So we were selected as one of those schools. I'm the co-chair of that group. We are in the process and just have reported out to the governor our first report in December. We're coming back in February saying, here's what we believe the accountability, at least the first phase of that will be. Some of that may be taken, some of the STAR tests, especially in the elementary age grade levels. And maybe maybe not every year, but we may be taking, say, a 3rd grade reading test and maybe a 4th grade math. We want to make sure that our kids are making progress. But we don't believe you have to test every kid every year in every subject in order to be able to determine whether we're making progress or not. And so we feel like that we're going to move forward with this as a community and as a group of 23 school districts. But now we have to have another bill. And that bill, we've been given the opportunity to plan. We haven't been given the opportunity to get out of the system. So we'll be working in this legislative session that goes from January through May with the legislature in order to get their okay to get out of the system and begin to work outside of it. And so that's where we are with that program, which it's really an exciting thing to think about. We're working with different groups, ACT, who has a 4th and 8th, a 10th, and an ACT test, working with them and their standards. We're working with SMU. They're partners of ours now. They're designing our evaluation program for whether we're being successful or not in terms of our student operation. So it's really an exciting opportunity that we have, and we hope that we can actually get out of the state system. So I'm going to stop there and then take any questions that you might have for some of these folks that really know this STAR program.
This is really upsetting, actually. What I'm hearing you say is that if our child is excelling in school and doing very well in school but doesn't pass these tests, they don't graduate? Okay. Who put that in place?
Vance, once you come back up, you've got the...
And that COPEL could possibly be exempt from this whole thing.
Turn it off for this part.
From what we say or
So,
what the community says?
in terms of graduation requirements, and a student will be denied a diploma based on their ESC performance, and yes, that's true. And what was the second part of your question?
So, okay, the TEA puts that into place, and are these people educators that put that into place?
Well, it's legislation. It's our legislators who first began with the laws and the mandates that go along with EndofCourse exams. So it's in the education code. It's basically the legislators who push that forward. Now, TEA does have some decisions. The Commissioner of Education has some decisions in terms of what are performance standards. What score does it take to meet the minimum requirement, or what score does it take to achieve satisfactory performance? That piece is under the Texas Education Agency, which is overseen by Michael Williams, the Commissioner of Education. But as far as the number of tests, that's all part of legislation, and so it's the legislators who decided what is needed. Now, are our legislators educators? Can't speak for all of them, but my guess would be the majority of them have not been educators. But yes, they are making the decision.
The commissioner has no experience in education.
Okay, so The goal would be to get out of the system for Coppell. That's the goal, right? As a community, what do you need from us? Do you need signatures? Do you need us to go march on the Capitol?
The question is with the goal that we have. First of all, informational. We want you to know what's going on. Secondly, our goal as a school district may be twofold. Our goal right now is focused on 1557 and the High Performance School Consortium and being able to get ourselves out of this crazy system and develop. And what the 1557 actually does is charges this group of schools with developing the next generation of standards, assessments, and accountability system. And so what we propose to do is to get out of their system, put together a reasonable system that assesses kids, that gives parents more information than they're getting now. I mean, you're not getting anything out of STAR. You don't even know what's tested on the test. But we would be giving you more information about your children in all the different subject areas, and we would be sampling, maybe for testing purposes for the state accountability system, rather than doing it the way they're doing it. They're using all the tests for accountability, which is putting major pressure in the system. So that's our goal. That's number one goal. The second goal, should we not be able to get out, and they say, no, you're going to take the test, just like everybody else, then what our goal is, okay, let's figure out, if we have to do that, let's do that. But let's figure out as a community, instead of putting the pressure on the teachers to do let's do that, but let's figure out as a community, what do we believe is important? Let's report out the things that you think are important to the child's education, and let's create an alternative system, not more testing, but a different way to report it out. And so when we can say, here's how we're performing. It's not just waiting on that ranking that the state gave us based upon all those tests that we had to take. And so we're wanting to engage the community in that conversation. I think there was another question.
I guess I'm a little confused. Is Texas the only state that is currently involved in this, or are there other states who are looking at their programs saying they've got issues too? And if so, is there going to be a larger consortium nationally?
As far as testing, all states, across the nation are required, based on No Child Left Behind, to administer some type of assessments in elementary and middle and high school, which is another thing that we certainly have to face as a consortium, is how can we still maintain be in compliance with the Department of Education and No Child Left Behind, but have an accountability system that we think is more representative. Now, as far as other states wanting to change their system, there are other consortiums. There's New York has a consortium that's very active in terms of re-identifying what the accountability and the assessment system should look like.
Most of the other states have adopted the Common Core curriculum. I think Texas is one of 4 that we have not adopted that. But with the Common Core, there's also Common Core assessments and Common Core evaluations of teachers and Common Core evaluations of administrators. So they're going down the same track. It's just calling it a different name. So it's basically the same thing we're doing, but there are groups out there that are developing consortia and resolutions against that track, the track of just testing kids and thinking that educating is equal to testing. And that's what we're saying, that educating is not a testing. And really, what does the government need to know about how our kids are doing? Well, they need to know that our kids are performing well on their road to being successful adults. We realize that, but we think you can do that without testing like the STAR program.
I guess, Mike, I hear a lot of reach out to the community. What are you guys doing to get the buy-in for the teachers and their input? Because I, as a parent, can look at all of those rubrics, and I'm familiar with Common Core, and it looks like Chinese to me. And so what I would look to the teacher to say, okay, my kid's taking Algebra 1, and this is a, sort of a topical, but what are the life skills that they're getting from this, or what's the value? I would look to the teacher to tell me that. So I hear a lot about parent, I hear a lot about administration, but what are we hearing from our teachers?
Thank you for that question. We are engaged in these conversations with our educators on a daily basis. Part of the consortium work, as Dr. Turner mentioned, was really looking at our standards and developing what are the next generation learning standards assessment and accountability system. I'm a part of the steering committee that is actually steering the design of those new high power learning standards and doing what you just said, looking at here are all the skill sets that we want to teach in Algebra 1, but really let's boil down what are the top 10 skill sets that we know they need to take with them when they leave us. And educators will be the ones designing that. So that information will be reported back to parents as well. So none of this work can be done without the involvement with the educators. Even when we reach out to parents and you help inform us on here are the measures that we want reported to us, we're going to have to take that information back to the educators and say, now how do we design our learning on a day-to-day basis to ensure that this happens? And more importantly, what are realistic ways that we can assess that your learners are having that? So they're going to have to be a part of this conversation from beginning to end. And I know Dr. Dennison wanted to add something as well. Okay.
So there's educators, but then there's our actual teachers.
When I'm talking about I'm talking about our classroom teachers.
Classroom teachers.
Classroom teachers.
Like
yes, classroom teachers
at the grassroots level. Let's talk to those
They will be
people.
the ones developing the next generation standards. Now, of course, there will be curriculum department members and experts in each of those fields that will be at the table, but ultimately it will be the classroom teachers helping us discern what is the difference between a prerequisite skill and a power skill. So it will be classroom teachers.
She had kind of started my question asking about other states. Surely there are other states out there that have figured this out. And you mentioned Common Core was probably what they were doing. So if that's not the answer, have we looked at private schools, what they're doing? It just doesn't seem like it needs to be this difficult.
You're exactly right. It shouldn't be that difficult. And the difficulty lies in trying to ensure that we meet state mandates and we meet federal mandates. So no, it really shouldn't be that difficult. Higher Ed's been doing it for a while. You know, Higher Ed is accountable to an accrediting body as well, and that doesn't rely on state tests. There are some examinations, you know, licensures and such, but yes, there are systems out there that work. What we want to make sure we do in this district is to involve the community and get buy-in from the community and have the community be a huge part in the development of it. So we don't want to take another systems tool and try to make it fit COPEL. But what we want to do is learn from those systems that do reflect authentic assessment, that do reflect true accountability for what we want students to know and be able to do, and learn from that and build an accountability system that works for COPEL ISD. So you're exactly right. It's not that difficult because it's being done elsewhere. But we want to learn from where it's being done elsewhere and make it fit.
Private schools generally don't, well, they don't at all test like this every year for every kid. They generally give normed referenced assessments, which allow the parents to know how their kids are doing compared to all the kids in the nation that are taking that assessment. And so they don't generally give something like a criterion reference test that the state, well, they don't ever give the criterion reference test that the state gives. So they just don't do that. In fact, if you look at the top 5 countries on the PISA test or the NAEP test, that's international test comparisons, those systems do not give tests like we do either. They're not all about testing, they're about educating kids, and then they just happen to give the test, the international comparison test. So interesting. And she, you know, it's a crazy system. She told you some of the things that are crazy, but there are all kinds of scenarios that go on inside that because it is so complicated. So you could have students who are passing their test, passing all of their coursework, and then passing at a minimum level of their EOCs. They could pass every one of them, but they may not pass them at a high enough level to go to a 4-year college. Think about that. So you pass all your coursework, you pass all the EOCs, but because you didn't score high enough on basically the English 3 and the Algebra 2, you can't go to a Texas four-year college. You have to go to a community college. Those kinds of things just aren't out there. The other thing, there are all kinds of standards out there or tests out there that give us a college readiness figure. Our kids take the ACT, there's a college readiness cutoff score, and we can report out that, 80% of our kids that took this test are at the college readiness level. The state's college readiness level on things like the AP, if they're going to use that, is that a student has to make a 4 on the AP test. Well, a 4 on the AP test gets you college credit anywhere in the United States. It's not a readiness level. It is credit. You get credit in any college you want to take it to. It's craziness. The system is so complicated. In about 2 years, the whole thing's going to fold in EOC because there are going to be so many kids backed up in the system that passed the course, didn't pass the test high enough, or didn't pass it at all, and then they start getting behind. They move on to the next course, but they haven't passed the EOC, and I feel sorry for counselors. Think about a counselor, got 3,000 kids here. Each one of the counselors has about 400. They've got to figure out which course that they've passed, which EOCs are they behind. It is an amazing problem that we're having, and we're just getting backed up in it. What we're saying, this is all crazy. And we've got to get back to what do we need to know as parents. By gosh, I wanted to know as a parent how my daughter was doing in every one of her subjects. And I wanted good information about that every year. But that didn't necessarily have to go to Austin or Washington, D.C. Why do they care about that? What Washington, D.C. needs to know and what Austin needs to know is with the money and investment that the taxpayers in our community are putting in the state, are the kids in Coppell ISD making progress along their educational journey, and are we using that money appropriately? It doesn't take testing every kid every year in every subject to know that. You can sample with the stratified random sampling and get that information that is fine. We do it all the time. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, we make national decisions based upon what the information that we get back from that test. It shows us how we compare internationally. And we want to talk in Texas all the time about our fourth graders were better than our fourth grade African American students, made more increase in this test than all the African American students in the other states. And we use those statistics all the time. Well, all of our kids don't take the NAEP. In Coppell, we may not even take it. It's every other year. We might not even take the test. But they randomly sample and they get that information, and statistically, it's valid information. Science is based upon random samples. And what we're saying is, you need to know things, state and federal government. Sample us, do some things that don't cause us to stop what we're doing and focus all of our energy on a test that may or may not have anything to do with educating that child. And so we're working in that system, and what we're saying, to the point, your point, what we're saying is, we're trying to get out of it. Your point. We're trying to get out of it. If we can't get out of it, we want to tell our teachers, ignore it. Now, don't ignore algebra or English or social studies. We're teaching the subject. Ignore the test. Let's come over here and let's figure out what we need to do for kids to be ready for their future.
And how do we get out of it?
Well, we're working to get out of it through the High Performance School Consortium and a bill that we're writing because we're part of this consortium, this district. We are part of this consortium that is saying, listen, if you will just give us a chance to quit spending, we estimate 30 to 40% of our time in the school day is spent practicing for the test, getting ready for the test, taking the test. If you will let us have that time back, and then we can help our teachers on what I talked about earlier of transforming from standing here talking to our kids to helping our kids involve themselves with the curriculum. If you'll give us about 4 or 5 years to do that, then you can test us on any measure you want to, and we will be outperforming the students that are working on the test. I think there's a question back here that I keep seeing.
Sorry. What is your estimated timeline for legislation passing and for development of the new system?
She's asking about the timelines, and what I would say to that is the legislative session just started and it ends in May. And so we will have a bill out. We will try to get the bill passed to give us the opportunity to move forward. This spring we're taking the STAR test just like everybody else in the state and EOCs, and then we hope that 2013-14 school year we will begin a phase 1 of transitioning away from the STAR program. Now, like I said, we may be taking some of those tests, but not the whole battery and all the things, the EOCs and things like that. The development of the new accountability system is ongoing. We're meeting actually Friday with ACT and looking at their standards, because they've got 40 years worth of research on whether kids are making progress toward a college and career ready pathway.
So you think maybe it'll take you about a year or two to get your new program developed?
We plan on in February having a next report that will have some of that information in it, but it'll probably have more or less some ideas that we're working toward, and we're working on a phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 over time to begin transitioning away.
So on those same lines, as Capella is making these changes and as we get more and more permission from our legislation to pursue this pilot, I mean, what do you see for the state of Texas? Are we going to be making changes and leading a cause on a statewide level? And how long do you see that taking?
I think that because of what we started in Coppell, actually, in the North Texas Regional Consortium with the resolution and the grassroots movement that is against high-stakes testing, that the state is going to back away from some of the testing program that you just heard here. I don't know how far they will come off of that, but I don't believe it'll be the same as it is right now. And I think that's good for all schools. That's not enough for us unless they let us out. You know, what we're saying is we can redevelop, we can do a better job of educating our kids in a new system. And I don't believe they'll go far enough. But I think we will get some relief from the current STAR program as it's structured in this legislative session.
Are state and federal monies directly tied to these test results?
You want to answer that?
There is federal money tied to the test results, and that if a campus or a district does not perform at a certain level over 2 years, then there are certain sanctions that go along with our title funds, which are our federal funds. So a campus in a district can have to can be required to reallocate their title funds as a result of not performing at a certain level. So yes, there are state and federal funds, but there are also local funds that are tied to the assessments as well. And we really didn't touch on this, but if it's okay, maybe we could speak a little bit about how when a student doesn't perform satisfactorily on an end-of-course exam, or in grades 5 and 8, where students have to pass their reading or math tests to be promoted, the campuses and districts have to provide accelerated instruction. That's an unfunded mandate. Now, certainly we want our students to be successful. Certainly we want our students to perform well in the assessments. But there are unfunded mandates that go along with the state testing program that for many districts, it may not be the best way for them to feel as if they should spend their budgets. So we do lose local control over local funds as a result of state testing.
It shouldn't impact the funds that we get. We are not asking for more money. In fact, you know, the state spends $92 million a year on this testing program. And what we're saying is we don't want any more money than what we presently have. Just allow us to create a system that performs what we believe is at least as well, if not better than what you have currently, that you're spending $92 million on.
I just had a question about your visit to Washington, and it sounded like the consortium idea was interesting, but then it kind of sounded like there was something that's not real positive. How do you feel? Do you feel discouraged in any way by that?
Discouraged, maybe not quite that strong. I was asked to go to Washington, D.C. TJES, which is the Texas Association of School Administrators. I'm currently the president, and I'm also the co-chair of the High Performance School Consortium that we talked about. And so we started, as we were working on this new, what we think the future should look like in terms of accountability, we realized that even if the legislature in the state said, hey, I tell you what, that sounds like a great idea, y'all go do that, that then we have to deal with the federal government and NCLB and all the things that that's associated with. So TJES, they decided we needed to go to Washington, D.C. and talk to them, at least start the conversation with what if we get out of this state stuff, can we get out of some of the federal guidelines? And so we met with the undersecretary about a Monday, a week ago, for education, and she was very sympathetic. She was very excited about some of the things I talked to her about we were doing here in Coppell and our vision for continuing that process in Coppell of changing school systems. Very excited about that. Talked about the difficulty with dealing with the legislation at the federal level and how they haven't been able to change some of those things. Talked about waivers, is what we were really interested in. Talked about the fact that the state has already now asked for waivers. Texas has asked for waivers. Is not specific on what we're wanting to waive, and so we don't really even know that. That has not been shared with us. But so they're kind of waiting on how the state plays out. So I don't know, discouraged. I guess it gave me a sense of the enormity of the task of trying to move federal law to try to get what we consider to be a better education for our kids.
Ultimately, we seem to be dealing with legislators. So is there, while we've got the teacher involvement, and this is probably not something that you guys could ever touch, but is there a movement against legislators in educating on a voter perspective, even from a local level on up? Is there anything moving in that direction?
I'm not advocating moving against. I'm advocating having conversation with, and I think that's what you see when you hear about what's going on in Austin right now. There are a lot of people saying we got to scale back this testing. I just saw where Senator in Amarillo, our senator, I just lost his name, Senator Seliger has proposed a complete revamp of the STAR program, which backs some things off, which I think is a positive step. And so I think that's become from people like you talking to their legislature and saying, listen, this is crazy. It's gotten crazy. There are meetings just like this going on all over this area. I know Highland Park had one last week, Northwest had one the week before, and parents are starting to get involved, and that grassroots involvement is how we get things changed. I've got a person that is one of the educational gurus out there that we talk to a lot, and he talks about how legislators aren't necessarily leaders. They view the scenery and figure out, what the public perceptions are, and then they lead out in that direction. And I think that you see that here. It was all about accountability and testing. We're going to test, and all of a sudden, when parents started saying, wait a minute, we as educators have been saying, wait a minute, for a long time. Nobody listens. But when parents start saying, wait, you're killing our kids. You're not educating them, you're killing them. You're keeping them from being educated in a lot of circumstances because those tests become a ceiling for kids. Some of our kids come to Coppell, they already can pass the test before we even help them with the information. But because of the way the test is, we end up having a ceiling for those kids. So I think parents sharing those kinds of things with our legislators help them understand that the system is just broken. It's gone too far to the one direction. It needs to come back and be reasonable again. And that's what we believe in. I've been in a system where certain kids were left out. And in my career as a superintendent, I've been in communities where if not for a system that tested and made sure that all kids were being educated, some kids just weren't. None of us are advocating going back to that. It's important that all of our kids have the opportunity to get a great quality education, and that's what we've been working hard here at Coppell to do. But hearing from parents will change things. That's the only thing that'll change it.
Why would they make the next test, the STAR test, be even more difficult from the very start? Why would they keep ramping it up?
Well, I think that every change they made was trying to fix the problems of the last one. They were trying to get a little bit more rigorous, push the edge a little bit, trying to close up some of the gaps to make sure nobody was slipping through those, and it just kept getting worse and kept getting worse, and I think that's kind of where we are now. They kept trying to tweak the system rather than coming back to the beginning and saying, okay, we're here to educate kids. Let's educate them, and then let's figure out how the state gets what they need to know, how the parents get what they need to know, and starting over again with the system, which is what we propose to do. A couple of questions, and then we're past our one-hour timeline here.
You talked about asking educators and parents what they think the kids need nowadays, the students. Have you also thought of looking at college admissions officers, asking to them, and actually going out to the trades, or even just kids who might go to work? I mean, one of the things I'm feeling sorry for here is, I think you quoted before, 30 or 40% of kids used to not finish college, high school. Could we fall back to that because these kids aren't going to think they can't meet the minimum, so they quit school?
Right.
You know, as legislators thinking, maybe we're trying to get the kids to here, but maybe some kids aren't going to get there and we'll lose them.
Right. Number one, we are doing some work with the college admission counselors, and so we're working with our colleges. And secondly, we do believe, maybe not as much in a Coppell, but when you look around the state at the school districts, that the dropout rate is going to go up because kids are going to get behind on the EOCs, they're going to get frustrated, and they're going to quit. And so we believe that system will cause the dropout rate to go higher.
Okay, my quick question is, I'm listening to all this and I'm going to take it all in, but I have 7 children. I've had 3 that have successfully gone through high school and are successfully in college with this old broken system. So I'm not sure that there's a little bit of scare here to some other parents that the old system was broken and it can't work, because I have my 3 oldest sons are highly successful right now and in schooling at Coppell and Louisville. And I have my 4th son, he's a junior in high school right now, and he's getting constant invitations to college. So, but my concern too is what you're saying about the STAR test. Right now, my 5th son, I haven't heard boo about his performance on the STAR test in 5th grade. So you're saying it's going to become even more difficult. Well, I don't even know how he did, except I was told by his teachers that he passed. But I haven't seen it. I don't know what his scores are. I'm still waiting. And also accountability. You've talked a lot about accountability. My 6th child is in elementary school. And personally right now, I'm really frustrated with, you're saying, the standards and the standards for our kids in their learning. Well, when the report cards come home and all I see is an ES or an MS, that tells us nothing. True. We do not know what our kids are actually learning, how we can better help them. So if we as parents don't know, how can we tell you what we think is lacking, what needs to be changed to better it for all the children?
So in response to the question about your 5th grade child, we are expected to get the reports back from the state in the next couple of weeks. We don't have those reports to send out, so we expect to get those paper reports from the state to send to you within the next few weeks. Now, the interesting piece is that
I've heard from some other neighbors, like my child is at Town Center, but I've heard from neighbors and people I go to church with who are like at Lakeside. Oh, our teachers already have the STAR scores for our students that they took last year.
Right.
And I'm thinking, wow, well, we don't have them.
Right.
And I'm just wondering, what is the difference?
Right. I'm not sure what the person who you spoke to was coming from there, but I can speak to what we do have available. Okay. And you know, we received raw scores last year. Raw scores don't really tell us much because there's not a performance standard. It's sort of like getting a raw score on an SAT. It doesn't really tell you much unless you know what the scale is, what the range is, and in terms of performance standards, you know, what is a 400, what is a 600, what is a 700. Those were actually set last month by the state. So I'm not sure why you're hearing what you're hearing, but I can guarantee you that no score reports have gone home from this district. In terms of, you mentioned about your older children and them being successful. What we want to make sure is that the state assessment system doesn't take away from the educator's ability to provide the best education for children. And what's happened is because we are now having to dedicate so many days to testing, we don't have as much time for students to learn as we've had in the past. So certainly kids can go through an education system and be successful. But with the state testing system that we have right now, we're concerned that that's going to impede upon students' ability to be successful. Not for all kids. There are going to be kids who can manage in any type of state assessment system we put out there. They could be tested once a week and they could be successful. But that's not necessarily the best thing we feel for all students. So certainly kids can be successful in a traditional system. You know, we have a lot of success, but is that what we want to continue with? Is that the system we want to continue with for students?
I'm sorry, my last question was trying to get a better grasp of accountability for the elementary students, because when we're told by teachers you only get a progress report if your child's failing, which is making a 74 or below, but the report cards that are sent home, all we see is an AS, an ES, or an MS. So first kindergarten through fourth grade, we really don't know where our child is in their learning. So is there how are you addressing this? Because then they start taking the STAR test in fifth grade on up.
Okay. I'm going to let somebody in the district who is more tied to the standards-based report card speak to that.
Hi, I'm Penny Trammell, and I'm the Director of Elementary Education. And we do have standards-based reporting in kindergarten through third grade right now. Our reporting standards are MS for Mastered Standards, AS for Approaching Mastery to the Standard, and IS, which is Insufficient Progress to the Standard. Our content core directors have developed rubrics that give teachers guidance in how to report out how a learner is doing toward mastering a standard. We look at the state TEKS, and the rubrics define what mastery is, what approaching is, and what insufficient progress toward the standard is. We also had the core content directors develop what we call mastery checks to kind of calibrate how we report out to our parents as far as learner progress toward mastering the curriculum. We do have some sessions coming up this spring to further educate parents. We did a survey last spring, and parents asked us to maybe look at the language on our standards-based report cards to simplify so that they could better understand, is my child needing to work on measurement with perimeter, or are they just not understanding inches and feet? So we are looking at simplification of the language so that parents do know, gosh, you know, I can work with my child on this concept when I'm in the grocery store, you know, if it's in the area of mathematics. So we are constantly seeking to improve that, and we'll continue to do so. And like I said, we do have some informational meetings coming up this spring. Our core content directors are working on the language on our report cards, because the purpose of a report card is to report progress to the parents. And so we realize we have some work to do on that, and we are in the stages of coming closer to doing a better job of reporting where parents can understand what to work with their children on in order to help them. Now we report out, instead of just the big content area of math, we report out on the standards and your child's progress toward mastering what they should be learning at the grade. If you think about an A, and you think about, okay, at elementary we have 9-week reporting periods. What does a teacher cover in a 9-week period? They might cover part of a geometry unit. They might be finishing up fractions or measurement. And so that grade is an average of all those tests that they've taken, all those assignments that they've completed. Now, sometimes a grade might mask an area that's weaker. So suppose your child is highly proficient in geometry but is struggling with measurement. You as a parent see the A and you think, okay, we're all good. But really, there's a little work left to do in measurement. And you might think, well, but they still averaged out to an A, so we're okay. But what we see is, as they get into more advanced mathematics, those little areas that they didn't quite master start to manifest themselves. So that's one little reason, or one big reason actually, that we switched over to standards-based grading and reporting. It's a huge shift for parents. It has been a shift for our educators, and we're continuing to work with both of those groups to better educate them. Our goal is for kids to master the curriculum that we're teaching. So,
thank you, Penny, and appreciate that. Good question, though, and we're trying to give more information, and maybe we need to do a better job of helping parents understand it. But I think it was a good example that you saw there. An A may feel good and be comfortable to me because that's how I was raised, with that being a good thing, but it really tells us nothing. Especially when it gets down to an A, okay, let's say it's a B. Then my children did some things in that course of that were at the A level. They did some things that were in the C level. Which ones were those? Well, I don't know as a parent. So that's what the intention is there. So anyway, appreciate you. I've kept you longer than we said. Appreciate you coming, and appreciate you being a supporter of the Coppell ISD as we are on this journey.